this movie that you are about to watch is probably going to be quite dry, but I want to keep it very informative, and here's what I'll do. I'm going to put chapter markers throughout the video that you can skip to if you wish to skip to certain sections. You can choose to watch the whole thing if you want. I know this video is going to end up really long. I wouldn't be surprised if it's about an hour long. So, yeah. Each of those chapter markers, I will be discussing bus lines in order. So in numerical order, for the most part. Some lines will be grouped together, so just keep that in mind if you're skimming through certain sections of it, because yeah, and also I don't talk about every single bus line. If I don't mention a bus line in here, it's because I just simply don't know enough about it. So keep that in mind as well. I don't mention every bus line in the Trimet system. So what is Forward Together? Well, it's a bus redesign that's meant to better serve the people. Since the pandemic began, people's travel patterns have changed a lot, with, you know, more people working from home, or people haven't fully returned to using transit. Ridership hasn't climbed to 100%, and no transit agency has. So it's clear that people's travel patterns have changed and that a bus redesign is necessary. And also because this has probably been needed for quite a few years now. Trimet introduced a survey, which I will link below, where you can comment on their changes. There are route cancellations, there are new routes, there are adjustments to routes. It's completely reworked, and it's extreme. Trimet claims that if all of these changes were to go into effect, up to 80% of the existing Trimet network would be completely different from what we see today. And you have until Halloween to make your comments, October 31st. And you can comment on up to 5 lines, which in my opinion is not enough, but it's because I'm sort of a Trimet transit nerd that knows about more than just 5 bus lines. But yeah, just keep that in mind if you're going to make comments about certain things. I personally wish there was no limit at all to this, as I could probably comment on 30 of these lines and have no problem. But that's kind of why I'm making this video, is to get all of those ideas into one big overarching Trimet Forward Together idea that's come from me, and what I would recommend doing, and why I recommend doing them that way. I'll show you what today's maps look like for these certain bus lines. They look like this. They have a black banner across the top and list the line numbers. They draw them in black. So if I show pictures of those, that's what you can check these on Trimet's website. They're just for every line. And I will show you some shots of the Forward Together map, which looks like this. It has lots of highlight marks and is very much more blue. So just keep that in mind when I throw all these maps on screen, which ones are today's maps and which ones are the Forward Together map. Alright, let's get into the things that I agree with. Let's start with line 4. Trimet wants to extend line 4, which currently ends in the middle of downtown, and they want to have it take over the line 19 portion on Bybee and Woodstock, which seems like that actually makes sense, and would provide frequent service on Bybee and Woodstock. Also, the line 19 would be adjusted and would go further down and over the Selwood Bridge and onto Johnson Creek Boulevard. This is my line 28, kinda. My idea was to have a bus that, it was a little different. It would serve the Tacoma Park and Ride and head straight down Johnson Creek Boulevard, because somehow there's no bus line on Johnson Creek. So this makes perfect sense to me. Lines 10 and 70. So the 10 will continue to do what it currently does by the Hawthorne Bridge, where it takes 7th Avenue and the former line 2 stops when it went over the Hawthorne Bridge. That's going to stay, but line 70 will be adjusted so that it goes through Ladd's Addition. That's very smart. That way, Ladd's Addition has bus service retained through it. Although I'll talk about this later, I don't fully agree with its routing and going away from 17th Avenue for so long. Line 11 gets its route adjusted and service increased. Finally, more service to Marine Drive. Line 15 in downtown gets extended from Yeon and 44th to St. John's. That's quite smart. Although I'd still like to see the 16 serving Solvay Island and the 15 serving St. John's, instead of having the 15 try to cover both. But that's just suggestion. Line 17 gets its frequency increased. I would like to see this eventually become a frequent service route. Line 24 gets a more direct route on the east side, where it connects with Park Row Summer Transit Center instead of Gateway Transit Center. It is a bit weird that it also continues beyond Gateway and takes over some of the 21. I think maybe those could still be separate routes, but if it works better just having it all as Line 24, then I'm okay with that. Line 25 runs more frequently and extends quite a bit of its route and goes to MHCC, the Mount Hood Community College. Trimet, I have a huge suggestion for this whole thing. Because frequency would now be better, and it's Gleason Street, there's already the 19 that goes on Gleason Street, so I would say Line 25 should just be called Gleason and have it do all of Gleason. The 19 should not do Gleason at all because it's already doing other stuff. I would highly suggest having the 25 on Gleason go from downtown Portland at Providence Park, 18th and Morrison, onto Burnside Street, over the Burnside Bridge, and then go up and through Sandy briefly, and then just go straight down Gleason. It could serve the Gateway Transit Center, and then come back out and serve Gleason Street all the way to Gresham, and to the Mount Hood Community College. Line 35 becomes a frequent service route, at least between Portland and Oregon City. Line 47 gets broken up into separate routes to ease confusion. Line 48 becomes frequent service. This was very unexpected to me. Finally, Cornell gets frequent service. Line 51 gets extended to connect with bus routes that are actually used. Although I don't fully agree with how they did it, I would rather have seen it continue down Dosh Road even further until it turns into 30th Avenue, and then from there it leads into Capitol Highway, and you could easily end it at the Barber Transit Center. That would connect with many, many more routes. And then at this point you could discontinue the 51 service to Council Crest and replace it with a new Line 3 that would run far more frequent trips and would kind of sort of be similar to how Washington Park and the Rose Garden, Japanese Garden get service from the 63. It'd be similar to that on the Line 3. Similar schedule. Do I want to go to the Rose Garden today or do I want to go to Council Crest today? That choice should be easily makeable. Line 52 gets frequent service. Finally, frequent service on 185th Avenue. The traffic here is terrible. Line 54 gets actual frequent service. No cheating this time. For those unaware, Trimet combines the Line 54 and 56 together, which provides 15-minute frequent service on much of Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway. But on their own, the 54 and 56 run every 30 minutes. They just overlap so that it runs every 15. Line 55 gets canceled. Now, normally I wouldn't be okay with them just canceling bus routes, but pretty much everything on the 55 is within walking distance of the 54, so I don't feel as though it's a major loss. Well, in the days since I filmed this, my opinion has kind of changed. After looking at it on a map, Sunset Boulevard and the start of Hamilton Street is kind of far away from other bus lines. So if instead you had the 55 starting in downtown Portland and heading up Sunset Boulevard and ending at Dosh and Hamilton where today's line 51 ends, that might make more sense. And then the rest of Hamilton Street all the way down to Raleigh Hills would be canceled, as most of it again is within walking distance of the line 54, as I said. Line 56 gets extended further than ever before down Shoals Ferry, way past Washington Square, and anywhere else that Trimet has ever gone before. I'm very surprised that this hasn't happened already, given that there is a lot of development that is happening, has happened, will continue to happen in this area. Line 59 gets rerouted to travel much further onto Walker Road. Although I don't fully agree with the alignment at 185th, where it goes on to Cornell briefly before coming back to Walker, while the new 111 takes Walker for that short stretch. That makes no sense to me. The whole 59 should be on Walker. That whole thing should be flipped. But whatever. And I also really like that it now starts at Beaverton Transit Center instead of Sunset. Line 62 gets extended a bit down Murray and into a neighborhood on Walnut Street all the way into Tigard Transit Center instead of Washington Square. This seems like it would be a bit more useful than taking Shoals Ferry to Washington Square. I might change the route name slightly to have that a little easier to understand, something like 62, Murray, and Walnut. It appears as though line 63 gets extended to Arlington Heights again. I think that makes sense at least during the weekday commuting times, because there are houses in that Arlington Heights neighborhood, and that was one of the major ways that they would get around is from the old line 63. I would say off-peak weekdays and on weekends the buses would still only go from downtown Portland to the Rose Garden. Line 67 gets extended over to 170th and crosses TV Highway at 170th. This is what we need. It also provides additional service on Allen Boulevard with the Line 88. Although I like my Line 89 idea as well, where the bus begins at Washington Square, travels up Shoals Ferry until Allen and provides dedicated Allen Boulevard service, and then heads up 170th until the El Monica Max Station Park and Ride. Line 68 gets canceled. The Markham Hill routes usually are supposed to provide faster travel times from OHSU to whatever other destinations. But the 68 really isn't a whole lot faster than just taking the already existing Line 8 out of OHSU and then transferring to a MAX at Pioneer Square, or to a Line 6 bus once you get to Columbia and Jefferson Street. Or 58. 6 or 58. Line 71 gets frequent service. 60th Avenue already pretty much has this, so this shouldn't be too difficult to roll out. Line 76 gets rerouted in Tigard to use 72nd Avenue. This is pretty big because 72nd Avenue is quite dense for employment, and the 76 is already a frequent service bus line. I think this would get heavily used. And so the portion on Durham Road would get a new bus line out of Tigard. I don't fully agree with the weird extension, periodic extension off to Oregon City. That seems like it's making the Line 76 very long, and it seems very out of place. I would personally just have the Oregon City portion as its own bus line out of maybe Tualatin Park and Ride. It's always good to be forward thinking, because if the Southwest Corridor project were to be built, Tualatin Park and Ride would become the new Bridgeport Transit Center. It's nice to have some route options and be forward thinking in that way. Line 77 would get frequent service. Again, this shouldn't be too difficult to do, as there are quite a bit of 77 trips throughout the day. Line 78 gets rerouted to Bonita Road. This is again quite forward thinking, because if the Southwest Corridor Max project happens, there would be a station on Bonita Road. Although I don't like to see service to PCC Sylvania just get canceled. Maybe this could be a new bus line out of Tigard. Line 79 gets frequent service. This one really surprised me. Express service between Clackamas and Oregon City on I-205 with buses every 15 minutes? Yes, please. Line 87 gets frequent service. Although I don't fully agree with the rerouting and it not serving relay resources, because I don't think it would be worthwhile to have a bus on 148th, but some weekday trips could serve relay resources from the 87, just like how today's Line 75 has some trips extend out to Naya on weekdays. But at least weekdays for relay resources, just have some only weekday buses going in there. It adds a couple extra minutes to the route. Lines 111, 113, and 115. This made me super happy to see. Hillsboro is finally getting some recognition. These are 3 major north-south routes in Hillsboro, whereas right now it's mostly east-west. The 111 extends from the 88's terminus at Willow Creek, which kind of makes you wonder why this isn't just the 88. It heads up Walker, although again I personally would have the 59 do that portion on Walker. The 111 should do Cornell Road instead. And heads up to North Hillsboro, where there are lots of businesses. The 113 heads up Cornelius Pass from the recent developments in the Reeds Crossing area, and goes as well to North Hillsboro. Also a genius move, it detours briefly to serve the Katama Max Station Park and Ride. I had never considered that when I was making the original route, and I wish I had. That's smart. This is similar to my Line 49. I'm going to talk about that later with the crazy, wild line numbers that Trimet came up with, and how that's not really necessary. The 115 heads up Century Boulevard, also going toward this North Hillsboro area. This takes over the 47 as well on Century and serves the Orenco Station Loop. Line 20 takes over today's Line 47 as well on Main Street and Baseline. And what this means is Main and Baseline will get its own dedicated bus. And it travels further than today's 47 does, going all the way to Willow Creek Transit Center. This is exactly how they should be redoing the 47. Although, again, I would just call this 47. I would not use the 120 number. Line 190 goes on Columbia Boulevard, a dedicated bus only on Columbia Boulevard. This seems like low-hanging fruit, and I'm very surprised that nobody has thought of this earlier. The 190 number seems kind of extreme, though. It could literally just be as simple as 5 Columbia Boulevard. It goes through North Portland, where there are some of those small line numbers. It doesn't really need to be 190. Now time for all the things I disagree with. I hope this all doesn't sound too harsh, but I want to get my points across in some of these parts. So, yeah. Apologies if I get worked up over things. It'll probably happen. Line 1. It doesn't end in downtown Portland anymore. It goes from the Maplewood area and heads down to Barber and Bertha only. It doesn't continue into downtown, even though it's very easy to do. It's not even really that much further. Hopefully that'll get restored someday. And I would like to see service hours expanded to all day. I think people don't realize the Line 1 goes right by Gabriel Park. This is a huge park. And I didn't know this until last year when I accidentally discovered, oh hey, the Line 1 serves this. It's not advertised anywhere. So hopefully that gets restored later with better service hours and weekend service so that people can go to Gabriel Park. And the Line 1 could easily be extended way further down Vermont Street until Olson Road and easily extend to the Washington Square Transit Center. And as far as that Shattuck Loop, quite a name guys, that would only be during weekday trips, kind of how it was before. Weekday mornings, Line 1s would do the Shattuck Loop going toward Portland only, and weekday evening rush, they would do the Shattuck Loop going toward Washington Square only. and then off-peak and Saturday, Sunday, they would just cut straight through Vermont and not do the loops at all. Line 17 discontinues all service north of downtown. All of it. All of Broadway and all onto that neighborhood at 24th or 27th Avenue, all discontinued. There would be no service from the Transit Mall over the Broadway Bridge. The only option would be to take the streetcar. And you're just supposed to know that. Lines 19 and 25. I've talked about it before, but I'm going to talk about it again in case you skimmed through this video or you fell asleep because I'm getting really boring. 19. Have this start in downtown Portland only. Downtown Portland all the way down, and do whatever you're doing with it going on Johnson Creek Boulevard. I'm totally fine with that. I'm 100% fine with that. But the 19 should start up at North Terminal in downtown Portland by Union Station and serve the Transit Mall and then do its thing. The 25 should be the Gleason bus, the one and only Gleason bus. The 19 should not be going on to Gleason. It's too confusing because it's confusing for multiple of reasons. The 19 is a C-shaped route. That it doesn't make sense to me at all why it's so crazy. But the 25 also takes Gleason after Gateway Transit Center. There's two individual bus lines here. You guys want to increase service on the 25 anyways, so just have a dedicated Gleason bus. 25 Gleason and 19 Johnson Creek. And so the 25 would start up at Providence Park, which fittingly lines 24 and 26 serve, so it would be perfect with the line numbers, 24, 25, 26. Have it go down Burnside, over the Burnside Bridge, and then from there it would just be a normal 19, but numbered as 25, Gleason, to Gateway. Then after Gateway Transit Center, it would come back out. So it would serve Gleason, go into Gateway, come out of Gateway, and go down Gleason again, and go to Mount Hood Community College. That's kind of confusing to explain only in words, but I've drawn it before on previous maps. All I'm doing here is I'm making Gleason one dedicated bus line and splitting it up so that the 19 isn't doing that weirdness. Lines 36, 37, 38, and 39. All four of these are set to be canceled. That's right, 4 lines canceled. The 36 and 37 go between Lake Oswego and Tualatin. I see a huge problem with this. Tualatin's already quite underserved by transit. Lake Oswego isn't terrible, but Tualatin is not great. This would entirely remove the link to get between those two cities. The 38 goes from Portland to Tualatin on Boone's Ferry Road, which I think would be major enough to at least not get bus service canceled on it. The 39 goes from the middle of nowhere to the Lewis and Clark College. Here's how I'd fix this. Keep the 36, but I would run it more on weekdays. It would only run on weekdays, and during the rush hours, the trips would get extended like they currently do. So 36s in the morning would extend beyond Lake Oswego and go to Portland. And then 36s in the evening would start in Portland and go through Lake Oswego and then to Tualatin. But because it's redundant service with the 35 on Macadam Avenue, you could have the 36 skipping a whole bunch of stops if you wanted to, kind of like how the 94 skips a whole bunch of stops on Barber, which is served as well with the 12. I'm going to talk about that later. The line 37 could be rerouted and renamed to be a bit more accurate. 37, Country Club, Cruise Way, which are two of the major roads it would go on. This route could also be extended, now hear me out on this, could be extended over the Selwood Bridge from Lake Oswego. That way you would go over the Selwood Bridge and it would end at the Tacoma Park and Ride to connect with the MAX. Now the reason why I would say that is like, oh wait a minute, the 19's already kind of going over the Selwood Bridge in this new plan. The 19 would go over the Selwood Bridge and head down Johnson Creek anyways. What's the point? It would allow you to get from the west side, Tualatin or Lake Oswego, over to Tacoma Park and Ride to get on the Orange Line. That is a trip that I think at least some people would make. The 38. This route runs on Boones Ferry Road, a fairly busy and windy road. Don't cancel this route. It's a direct link from Portland over Boones Ferry all the way to Tualatin. Although I would change the route, it does not have to go onto Cruiseway and 72nd, because the line 37 that I just talked about could take over the Cruiseway portion, and line 76 would be providing frequent service on 72nd. So, what I would do here is I would just keep the 38 on Boones Ferry the whole way through. It would never leave Boones Ferry. It would go from Portland, stay on Boones Ferry, and just stay on it all the way until the Tualatin Park and Ride. And during some weekday rush trips, they would go via Kerr, where they kind of detour and go on to Kerr and then come back onto Boones Ferry. Weekday rush trips only, but off-peak, it would just cut straight through Boones Ferry. I hope that's not too confusing. The 39 might be able to get more use if it actually connected to downtown Portland. This is entirely speculation, but I would say it probably still wouldn't run excellent service. But if you had the bus starting at Lewis and Clark College and following the same route as it does, but instead just goes straight down Barber Boulevard and goes straight into downtown Portland from Barber, that might make some trips make more sense. If you had it do that, then you could have it take Columbia and Jefferson Streets, and it would basically just be the same thing as the 38 to the end point there. Would this be redundant with the 38? Yes. It would be very, very, very similar. But I think it would make the 39 at least make a little bit more sense. Lines 43 and 56. Wow, I really dislike this. Honestly, the idea of the 56 going to OHSU isn't even the part I dislike. It would distinguish it a bit better from the line 54. It would even provide a new way to get to OHSU from the west side, something not really currently possible. So, what's the part I dislike? The 43. Should service on the 43 be upgraded to 7 days a week? Absolutely. Should the route be changed in this way? No, absolutely not. Today's 43 runs on Taylor's Ferry Road, which is a fairly major road, during weekday rush hour only, which really surprises me, the same way that the 38 runs on Boones Ferry, weekday rush only. That's surprising to me. And while that doesn't sound too bad, again, expanding service hours to run 7 days a week and every 30 minutes, that's not bad. I'm totally fine with that. But Trimet wants to take this route off of Corbett Avenue, and I have a couple major issues with that. This strips all possibility of serving that neighborhood. Now the people that live in this general area are going to have to walk onto NATO Parkway somehow. Go ahead, look at satellite imagery, look at Street View, tell me how you're going to walk from that neighborhood onto NATO easily and board those buses. Or maybe go to Macadam Avenue, walk over that Gibbs Street bridge thing over I-5 and... what? There's a neighborhood squeezed in right in through here, and the line 43 is Trimet's only route that serves it, and now you guys want to get rid of this? Service on Corbett Avenue and through this neighborhood has been provided forever. I mean, it even follows one of the old streetcar routes almost exactly. I strongly dislike this idea of making the 43 better. Leave it alone. There was nothing wrong with the 43. The only thing I would suggest doing to the 43 is extending service to 6th and Burnside so that it turns around at 6th and Burnside. And adding the all-day service. I would be totally fine with all-day service through this area. I also asked myself when I looked at the map of the 43, why doesn't this serve Washington Square anymore? It just kind of turns the other way and goes straight to Tigard Transit Center. It gets so close to Washington Square and doesn't serve it. But I gotta be honest with you, upon looking at it a second time, serving Washington Square would just kind of be pointless because you're kind of in between both transit centers. Which one are you going to choose? Are you going to choose the smaller transit center that connects to a shopping mall? Or are you going to choose the transit center that connects with a lot of other bus lines, downtown Tigard, and a commuter rail station? So yeah, okay, have the 43 go to Tigard. Lines 43 and 44. Yes, I'm not done talking about the 43 yet. This is really quite simple. Just have the buses serve Barber Transit Center. That's it. It adds an extra 30 seconds to the route. Both of these lines go right by Barber Transit Center and do not serve it. You want your transit center to actually have connection options? You want your transit center to be used as a transit center? You may want to extend 43 and 44 here. Lines 44 and 96. Trimet decided that they wanted to extend the 44 over top today's line 96 service and have it continue straight down far south to Commerce Circle. And at first glance, this seems perfectly fine. But then I asked myself, okay, what happened to the line 96? Well, I gotta look at I-5 and, wait a minute. What happened to the 96? The 96 got totally canceled. What? This was one of Trimet's coolest routes. You can get from Tualatin to Portland in 20 minutes. You heard that right. Tualatin to Portland in 20 minutes. This bus went on I-5. It was fast. And Trimet claims that this bus route wasn't used all that much. Next time you have the chance, go out on a weekday, ride the 96 from Tualatin Park and Ride into Portland. The buses are not empty. Why did they remove this? I made a four-part series comparing 3 different bus lines, the 12, 94, and 96. In short, the line 12 took 34 minutes to go from Tigard Transit Center to downtown. The 94 took 24 minutes to get from Tigard to downtown. The 96 from further away in Tualatin took 20 minutes to get from Tualatin Park and Ride to downtown. It's fast. The way I would solve this is, sure, extend the 44 down to Commerce Circle. I don't mind that. But keep the 96 in there somehow, even if it's shortened to only go between Tualatin Park and Ride and downtown Portland. Even if it only did that, and it only did it on weekdays, or whatever, I'm fine with that. Just keep the 96. Then if you wanted further service to Mohawk Park and Ride, yeah, that's really called Mohawk Park and Ride, or Commerce Circle, then you could transfer to a 44 once you get to Tualatin Park and Ride. Line 46. They want to cancel this route. What? This serves Intel. This bus line serves Intel. It's the only bus line to serve Intel Jones Farm. Why are we canceling this? Hillsboro needs better bus service, not this garbage. Here's the deal. You want to know why this line has such low ridership? Well, let's just say over the last 2 decades, Trimet has slowly reduced service on the 46 to where it's now practically unusable and only serves times during the weekday rush, even though it serves all up and through Glencoe Road and Evergreen and through some major areas, including Intel, and now has been reduced to just like 5 morning trips and 5 evening trips or something. That doesn't exactly make you want to travel on this bus line. You might have lived in this neighborhood right off the 46 forever and have never ever taken this bus route because its service pattern is so unusable that you just don't want to ride it. That's why there's no riders on this bus line. Instead of canceling this route, you need to be adding buses to it. I have a section on this later about the Hillsboro Bus Improvements if you want to learn more about what I would do to the 46. Okay, this is one that I mentioned earlier, but if you skipped around, then I'm going to be talking about it again. The line 51. I'm actually okay with the extension piece, how it goes a little further down Dosh, but I don't agree with how it ends. Instead of what they want to do, I would have the 51 continue much further onto Dosh Road until it becomes 30th Avenue, and then that leads into Capitol Highway. It's pretty easy from here to just have the 51 end at the Barber Transit Center. Yeah, I'm actually going to make Barber Transit Center into an actual transit center and not just the 12. This would connect to far more bus lines than the existing plan to have it just go down Sunset Boulevard and end at Barber and Bertha. This would connect to far, far more. And the portion to Council Crest would get its own bus, so the 51 would no longer have that weird branch with some buses going to Council Crest. That portion would be replaced by the Line 3, Council Crest. It would start from downtown Portland and goes to Council Crest. Now, the route would possibly be a bit shorter than today's 51, not serving the Talbot Road area, but instead, when it goes onto Patton Road, immediately goes onto Greenway Avenue and just serves the Council Crest Park. That way it's a bit faster. The service pattern and schedule would be similar to the 63. You could wake up tomorrow and say, do I want to go to the Rose Garden today or Council Crest? You know what? I'm going to go to Council Crest. I'll go board a Line 3 today. And you could do so at any time throughout the day, 7 days a week. So that portion would get the 3, Council Crest, and then the 51 would become Vista Dosh. Dosh. Line 57. No change at all. This line had no change. I'm actually fine with that. Of course, I don't want them to just be changing up something that doesn't need to be changed. But what I'm concerned about here, and I've talked about it a few times, is TV Highway is stupid crowded. It is, if you've been on the 57 before, at any time throughout the day, any day of the week, you'll know what I'm talking about. I personally would really like to see frequency increased on this route to every 10 to 12 minutes, depending on time of day. Actually, I'll give you 2 options to pick from. Number 1, increase frequency to every 10 to 12 minutes and run the buses more frequently on TV Highway. Or number 2, buy 60-foot articulated buses for this route. Ideally, you would choose both. Clearly, the people who designed these changes and designed all these route upgrades, but left the 57 at 15-minute frequency, have never been on the 57, or at least haven't during the busy weekday rush. It's time. We really need a frequency upgrade. Lines 61, 64, 65, and 66. I am going to talk about these in the service redundancy section a little later. I'm not going to get into it too much, other than don't cancel these. Line 70. Now, I'm perfectly fine with it going through the Ladd's Addition, so that we restore service through Ladd's Addition. But I feel as though this bus goes away from 17th Avenue for too long. Trimet wants to have this rerouted over to 26th Avenue, which is already going to be served by the Line 10, all the way up and follow it, and then go through Ladd's Addition. And this portion, where it goes on to 26th, would go from Bybee all the way to Division. That is a long stretch of 26 that's already got Line 10 service and no Line 70 service anywhere else. I would instead have this extend on 17th Avenue to the 17th and Holgate area, which is served by the Max Orange line and Line 17. And so it would connect with some other bus lines, have it go down Holgate until 26th, and then do that. That way only from Holgate to Division would be rerouted onto 26th, instead of all the way down at Bybee to Division. You avoid the rail crossing, which was the whole point of the whole Line 70 reroute, and it keeps a little more familiarity because it actually connects with the Max Orange line still, barely. Line 76. Now, I already mentioned it earlier, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. Service to Oregon City. And while I don't see a huge issue with the 76 extending to Oregon City, it just really doesn't feel right. I would recommend, if you want service from Tualatin over to Oregon City, that's fine. But I would suggest just creating a new bus route to do that, because it seems really out of place for the 76 to be serving that, especially since the 76 is a frequent service bus line, but they only want trips to Oregon City every hour. Seems kind of weird. So 1 in 4 buses will be continuing to Oregon City. That's weird. Maybe this would somehow be an extension or reworking of the line 154, but I don't have info on how I would change that or how I would do that, as I haven't really looked into it. Line 88. I don't really understand why this was canceled. It's replaced by the new 111, which serves the exact same route as the 88 and just extends further into Hillsboro. Why is it called the 111? It should just be called the 88. You could call it the 88 Evergreen 198th. Lines 91 and 95. I don't really get the point of either of these. They seem really close to already existing routes. The 91 appears to go up 112th Avenue. That's literally just 10 blocks away from a frequent service line, the line 73, and really close to I-205, where you already have Max Green Line service. This really doesn't feel necessary. The 95 goes up 148th Avenue, and it falls right in between lines 73 and 74. I really don't see the purpose of this other than that it connects with the Max Blue Line station at 148th. I already talked about how the line 87 should more or less remain unchanged other than the frequent service if you're concerned about how relay resources would be served. It would just be the 87, and it would only be weekday trips that would do that, and only during those busy times of the day. Lines 94 and 99. I'm going to talk about these in the service redundancy section later in this video, but I will mention that I don't understand why the 94 was completely stripped and canceled and renumbered to the 130. Just leave it as the 94. There's no reason to renumber that. Line 96. I already mentioned it, but I want to drill it through your head again, and in case you're skipping around. Keep the 96, Tualatin to Portland in 20 minutes on I-5. Keep the 96. For more info and my heartfelt opinions about that, rewind to a few minutes ago when I was talking about the 44 and 96. Line 97. This route doesn't need to be messed with much, but again, they did the same thing they did with the 94. They're going to cancel it and just more or less renumber it to 131 and extend it further into Tualatin and Tigard. I think at least having it extend to Tualatin Park and Ride would be useful, because right now it goes from Sherwood to the Tualatin West Station and doesn't serve Tualatin Park and Ride, and that just seems weird. So at least extend it to there. Lines 111, 113, 115, and 120. I don't get what the deal is with the crazy high line numbers. There are perfectly good line numbers in the 40s available for these. I'm going to cover that in more detail in the more strategic line numbers section of this video. Okay, now for something I noticed happens quite a few times on these proposed maps. Trimet appears to change things just for the sole purpose of changing things. It doesn't really make much sense. I'm going to show you 3 examples of this, but there are many examples, but these are the 3 big ones that stuck out for me. Lines 6 and 14. Currently, today, the line 6 continues down Jefferson or Columbia Streets and ends up at the Goose Hollow Max station, and it connects with the Max there. The 14 goes over the Hawthorne Bridge, ends up on Main and Madison, and ends at City Hall. For some reason, Trimet wanted to flip that around, so now line 6 would end at City Hall, and line 14 would continue down Columbia and Jefferson and go to Goose Hollow. That's moving the problem from one area to another. That's not fixing anything. And both lines go over the Hawthorne Bridge. So here's how I would change this. Leave the 6 alone. Don't change the 6 at all. It would still go Jefferson and Columbia over to Goose Hollow. But line 14 would extend and go up the transit mall. It would serve 5th and 6th Avenues. And it would go all the way up to North Terminal. I think that would be more useful. That way the line 14 would connect with the MAX at Pioneer Square, as well as the green and yellow lines. And it would just make a little more sense. It's a frequent service route. It seems like it kind of ends in the middle of nowhere if it's just ending at City Hall. The 10 already ends here, so just do that. This would be similar to how the line 2 once served the transit mall and then went over the Hawthorne Bridge. It would very likely be the same stops on the transit mall. That's how many times can I say the word transit mall? Lines 15 and 16. I see what they were after here. The 15 is a busier line and runs more frequently, so it could easily be extended over to St. John's. And then you could have some 15s go up to Sovey Island. And then you flip it, and the 16 would just end there at Eon and 44th. That way it would be a reverse of today, where line 15 ends at Eon and 44th, and the 16 continues to St. John's, and then goes back over St. John's Bridge, and then into Sovey Island, which is kind of confusing. That is really confusing. But how I would fix this is, instead of splitting the 15 up to do St. John's and then some trips would do Sovey Island, that's 2 different destinations. You have 2 different bus lines running through here. Just have the 15 go to St. John's, so it would extend, so there would either be line 15s to 23rd and Thurman, a line 15 to maybe Eon and 44th, but many of them would be a 15 to St. John's. And then the line 16 would still continue to provide service to Sovey Island, and the 15 would not. So you would have the 15 going over St. John's Bridge to St. John's, the 16 would stay on St. Helens Road and go over the Sovey Island Bridge. Also a bit unrelated, I would also extend line 16's route so that it's not turning around using a weird loop in downtown like it currently does. I would extend this much further down Nadeau Parkway until Jefferson and Columbia Streets, where it would go all the way down Jefferson and Columbia, serving the same stops as the 6, 38, 45, 58, all those. Lines 48 and 62. For some reason, Trimet wants to flip these near Sunset Transit Center to where the 48 would continue on Barnes Road and do what the 62 currently does, and the 62 would go down Cedar Hills Boulevard and then Cornell. Seems kind of pointless and backwards, and the line 48 is literally called Cornell, and yet you guys want to route it so that the 62 serves more of Cornell right there at the beginning. That just doesn't seem necessary. So how would I fix this? I wouldn't. Just leave it how we currently see it today. It already works fine. Okay, now this is huge. Here is how not to interpret low ridership routes. I think Trimet is analyzing their low ridership routes in a very misleading way. Logic would seem to say, well, this bus line has really low ridership, so let's cancel it so that we don't have to worry about it anymore, because nobody's using it. Sometimes this is true and you should cancel it, but it's also especially true if you are planning to replace service through here with another bus route that's more frequent, has better service and stuff like that. Then sure, cancel one line and replace it with an extension or reroute of another one. Yeah, okay, I get that. But if you're canceling a route in an area where it seems like the ridership really shouldn't be all that low, ask yourself a couple questions. What did the schedule look like on this route when ridership was higher? Have you slimmed service since then? Is the schedule or service pattern convenient in any way? Does it connect with other bus lines? If you have been slimming down your bus schedules to unusable levels except for a select few employees that have been going through a pandemic with staffing shortages, and you wonder why your ridership is low, you kind of already have your answers. If you make transit inconvenient by slimming the schedule down, less people are going to want to ride your bus. So less people ride your bus. And so you have low ridership. So the way you fix this is not by canceling it, but by increasing frequency, making the schedule much more friendly for people to go and ride your bus line. This takes time. This won't happen overnight. You have to build up people's trust again that they can use this route. Imagine you wake up at early in the morning and you missed the 5th bus that's supposed to go by your house, and now you have to wait until 3 o'clock p.m. in order to travel out of your house on transit again. I'm not going to ride that transit line because it has a terrible schedule. But if instead you had even hourly service, but ideally it would be better than this, that went up through the roads, at least you know there's a transit option that runs all day. So I'll look at the schedule and I'll go to the bus stop a little bit before and ride transit. Let's talk about the 46, which I mentioned earlier. It serves Intel Jones Farm, as well as some other things, and a quite large area of residential and kind of near the airport. But Trimet wants to cancel this route because of low ridership, where right now we only get a few morning trips and a few evening trips. The way you fix this is not by canceling it. This goes through major areas. This could be a very useful bus route. But instead, we've reduced service to only a few trips, and then you wonder why nobody's using it. The way you attract new riders is to say, we're going to expand the schedule on this so that it provides you with more of a reason to ride transit. And you could advertise to Intel and say, we're going to be providing more trips to Intel. Do you live nearby? Use line 46. It serves the Hillsboro Transit Center and the Fair Complex Park and Ride. These are major areas that you can already access by transit or whatever. And it would allow you to make more trips. Instead of it only being for employees, really, you could have service expanded throughout the whole day so that people can make trips to do whatever they want to do. Canceling this route will force every Intel Jones Farm employee to drive their car to work. It will force them into that. That doesn't look good for a transit agency. Seriously, guys, this is not the way forward. Skip ahead to a chapter on Hillsboro Bus Improvements if you want more info on how the 46 would be redone through my eyes. The point is, if you're considering canceling a route because of low ridership, but you don't understand why it has low ridership, because it seems like this route should be at least a bit busier than this, then consider what the current schedule is and how much more likely you would be to take this trip if you lived in this neighborhood. If you were to live in that neighborhood and you look at the current schedule and it's like, I don't want to get stranded somewhere, I'm not going to do this, I'm just going to drive there. That's not taking a car off the road, that's doing the exact opposite. So ask yourself, would increasing the service on this route make it so that more people use it? The answer is oftentimes yes. Trust me, give it a try. Expanding service hours on the 36, 37, 38, the 46, among others, see what happens. If it doesn't work in a couple years, then sure, you can reduce it, but I have a feeling it will get better if you increase the frequency on these routes. Notice how when Trimet a few years ago upgraded lines 20 and 76 to frequent service, notice how much busier they are? They are always busy. They're always busy, and yet there are twice as many buses. The buses come more frequently. You think they would be less busy. They're not. When you increase frequency, it gets locked in your head that, oh, well, I'm just going to take this bus route. It runs frequently. And then that encourages more ridership, and you see a growth in ridership. Canceling routes is how you begin a death spiral. You don't want to be entering a death spiral. And you can hop on these, you could have hopped on these over the last 2 years, and you'll see that the ridership remained high through the pandemic. high frequency, and 15 minutes isn't really that high, but that higher frequency saved these lines. And now for another place I think Trimet really missed the mark. Service redundancy. Since when was this a bad thing? Trimet currently has lots of routes that sort of interline into one road, and then they branch off and do other things. Or it could literally just be the exact same route on the same road, but serving some express stops only. Well, following that mentality of redundancy, then, we better shorten the max red line to only go from Gateway to the airport. And we also better shorten the green line to only go from Gateway to
Clackamas.
Because it's redundant. You can already take the blue line through this stretch. It already exists. There is nothing wrong with having multiple lines serving the same road and then branching off to different destinations. That's how excellent transit systems are made. And Barber Boulevard does this extensively. Imagine you only needed to go a short distance on Barber Boulevard before everything started to branch off. You, depending on time of day and depending on your destination, you may only have to wait a couple minutes for a bus, even if you just missed a different bus, because there's so many different options to go this short distance. It increases frequency through that stretch. That's a good thing. How is redundancy a bad thing?
Okay, redundancy can be a bad thing. I want to make that clear. If you have something like today's Line 55 where it ends at Raleigh Hills, it's more or less a Line 54 that nobody's really using, doesn't provide very good service, and doesn't really need to exist. Much of it, you can just take the Line 54. So that sort of redundancy isn't really a good thing, as the 55 doesn't really bring much to the table. But for examples that I'm about to bring up, like the 12 and the 94, while they may seem like identical routes, their service patterns are different because the 94 goes express.
I will talk about two groups of lines that I find have the biggest issue with service redundancy, and what Trimet claims is the issue with this. But you'll find many examples if you read through the descriptions of each of the bus lines on that page. You'll see a lot of ones that say service will be canceled due to redundancy and replaced with this, service is redundant with this, service is redundant. Some of them make sense because they're literally just replacing the whole route with a rerouted existing route. How many times can I use the word route? But the point is, some of these are literally being canceled because there's already a bus line on this road, and that is not a good enough reason to just cancel a route. Lines 61, 64, 65, 66, and 68. The Markham Hill routes. Other than the 68, I don't really see a reason to cancel all of the Markham Hill routes. These can be incredibly useful and get you to places quickly. I sort of get the mentality, yeah, the 61 is basically a Line 54 already. Yeah, the 64 is kind of a Line 44 and 12. Yeah, the 65 is kind of weird. Yeah, the 66 is basically a Line 9 and a 75. So what's the big deal? The routes exist already. Well, that ignores a slightly bigger problem at hand. Some of these, as you saw, are multiple routes, meaning you would have to transfer, you'd have to get out of OHSU, transfer to that route, and possibly transfer again. That is going to take you forever to get home. Not to mention, the Markham Hill routes, other than the 68, skip lots of stops, which can get you home, or whatever, even faster. That's the appeal of these Markham Hill routes, is that they're fast. I mean, the reader board on the front of the bus literally says Express in huge letters for a reason. These are fun to ride. I've been on the 61 and the 66 before, and they just don't serve all that many stops. Imagine a world of none of these Markham Hill bus routes. You have to take a bus to get to work that's a local bus, not express. then go all the way up to OHSU, work for 8 hours, and then you got to take this whole route all the way home. Whereas nowadays, you can cut that travel time down because there are Markham Hill buses that go directly to OHSU and branch out to these neighborhoods and transit centers. It's just much faster. That's the whole point. You're not going to want to transfer multiple times, take a slow bus route, and all that sort of thing. You just want to get home.
Here's a slightly bigger point that I can't believe I didn't even mention. This whole extended travel time might end up deterring these OHSU employees from using the transit route, which again, sounds like a death spiral.
That's not really fair to those workers. And here's another thing. Let's say I'm waiting at a bus stop that just so happens to be served by one of these Markham Hill routes, and I'm trying to get to some sort of destination. You can bet if a bus shows up that says Express and it goes to where I'm trying to go, I'm gonna board that. Do you want to get there more quickly or less quickly? I found this myself when I filmed the Line 20 bus on Burnside. I got off at Cesar Chavez Boulevard and I wanted to head up to Hollywood Transit Center so I could take the Max back home. And lucky for me, a 66 showed up in a couple minutes and it just served 2 stops to get to the Hollywood Transit Center, much faster than the 75. And I'm not an OHSU employee. I didn't come from Markham Hill or OHSU. I got on this bus because I wanted to quickly go to Hollywood Transit Center. It serves more than just OHSU workers, although that is, for the most part, what it is. So I just really don't see the point in canceling these. That's really the bottom line here. Don't cancel the Markham Hill routes except for the 68. Keep these routes. It gets the employees to work quicker or to home quicker. And with one or more, possibly, fewer transfers. It's that convenient.
One other thing I feel I should mention is that if the Southwest Corridor Max gets built, Markham Hill service would definitely have to be adjusted because the Max would be providing the main service through here. But I'm going to do a dedicated video on that in the future, so stay tuned for that.
So now I'm going to black out the screen, and let's take a look at all of the bus routes that would serve OHSU through my recommendations. Notice that the line 43 is not on here, and the lines with the stars on them would run only during weekdays. Meaning, yes, I would have the 66 running all day long, as I have found that very useful. Again, you'll see the 43 is not on here because I strongly disagree with how they have that. But the 56 is on here.
So I totally fumbled through this line here when I was explaining it, so let me try and make sense. Basically, I'm okay with having the 56 differentiated a bit from the 54, as from Shoals Ferry all the way into Portland, the 54 and 56 are the exact same route, so I'm okay with having a bit of difference there.
The other redundancy issue I have is with the line 94, and to a lesser extent the 99. Trimet wants to cancel the 94, how it goes faster into Portland from Tigard. Again, I want to drive this point home. The 94 is fast. The 12 is not. If I am sitting there in Tigard, if I'm just standing around and I want to take the bus into Portland, I would be very unwise to board a 12 onto Barber to get into Portland. I would much rather take the 94, which is the exact same route from Tigard to Portland, but it serves far less stops and gets me there faster. I said it before, earlier, and I'll say it again. The line 12 takes 34 minutes to go from Tigard to downtown Portland. The line 94, same route, takes 26 minutes to go from Tigard to Portland. It's faster. Why is this so much faster? The line 94, between Tigard and the start of downtown Portland, the line 94 serves 4 stops. 4 stops. That's it. How many does the line 12 serve? 40 or so stops. Yeah, that's why the 94 is so much faster. Why are we canceling this? So now let's talk about students. Trimet's doing something a bit interesting, and they've already done it with the September 2022 service reduction thing. Service has been cut back. Service hours have been cut back on several lines to only serve during high school times, so that it's only serving the high school students, more or less. For example, the line 1. Now, I guess I get it. It seems kind of weird, but I do get it. So if we want to focus some of the bus routes on only serving students, then of course we should look no further than the PCC campuses. What happened to the PCC campuses on the west side? Right now, today, PCC Rock Creek is served by 3 bus lines on weekdays and 1.5, as the 52 doesn't really on weekends, on the weekends. The 47, 52, and 67 to be exact. And PCC Sylvania is served by 2 bus lines on weekdays only, the 44 and 78. And with the proposed changes, now there are only 2 bus lines serving PCC Rock Creek, the 52 and 67, and only 1 bus line serving PCC Sylvania, the 44. That's kind of weird. So much for serving the students, right? Now time for Hillsboro Bus Improvements, a series of videos that I have made before on this channel that of course get updated periodically, so they're already outdated. Literally just a few weeks ago, before this Forward Together thing was announced, I made a video, filmed it, edited it, was gonna upload it. It was going to be today's video too, that's what's weird. And it was a version 2, all the Hillsboro Bus Improvements V2. And it was going to go up today. And then this Forward Together thing happened, and now I can't upload that video because I didn't know this was going to happen. I'm going to upload it anyways, but I'm going to leave it unlisted, and I'll leave a link for it in the description if you really want to watch it, but I am going to cover the details here. Remember, Hillsboro is rapidly growing. We have 108,000 people here, and growing each and every year. We have major employment areas. We have housing going up absolutely everywhere. And the same 4 bus lines from 20 years ago, with less service than 20 years ago. And Beaverton, a city with less people, has far more bus lines and is actually fairly well served by transit. At least as long as you live near-ish to Beaverton Transit Center. Firstly, line 41, Century Boulevard. This idea of mine is very similar to Trimet's, except that I had mine ending at the Hillsboro Stadium, but honestly I think Trimet's makes a bit more sense here, where it ends up in North Hillsboro and serves more businesses. Hillsboro Stadium, I suppose, could get its own bus for special events only, maybe from Orenco Station Loop up to the stadium during events only, and it may not even be a Trimet thing. Line 47 would get split up into 3 routes. The 46 on Glencoe and Evergreen would be exactly the same as what we see as today's 46, but when it gets to Evergreen at the very end by the Brookwood Library, it would just head straight down Evergreen and take over today's 47. And it would just stay on Evergreen all the way until PCC Rock Creek. It would be all of that. The new 47 would be like how today's 47 starts in downtown Hillsboro, and it would head down Main Street, and then that becomes Baseline, and it would just stay on that until Willow Creek. That would be the new line 47. And the portion on Century Boulevard I already talked about would be the 41 and would go much further to the South Hillsboro area.
Well, I can't believe I forgot to mention this too, but this line, 47, is basically Trimet's line 120, so they already thought of it.
I have a new line that I've created that I've never talked about, not even in my Hillsboro Bus Improvements version 2, as I had not thought of it yet. I guess you could use line 50 for this. Maybe it's too soon to reuse the line 50 number. The route would be called or go between Orenco and Willow Creek, but it would do so in a very crucial way. It would start at the Orenco Station Loop, travel up Century, and head straight down Evergreen until it gets to the 185th and goes into Willow Creek Transit Center. So it kind of goes up and over Hillsboro. Now the reason for this line existing is because there are a lot of things off of Evergreen. And with my ideas, the line 46 on Glencoe and Evergreen would not really serve a MAX station very well once it gets up on Evergreen. So having a new bus line, my new 50, would make it so that you could travel from Evergreen down to Orenco to connect with MAX, or down to Willow Creek to connect with more MAX, or what other bus lines would be serving that. I watched a video of a bus line on Evergreen, and then it came down Century Boulevard, and then once it got to the Orenco station, most of the people on that bus got off, which tells me that if you work up on Evergreen, you could use that bus very well to have it go down Evergreen and then end at Orenco station, where you would then be able to take the MAX the rest of the way home.
Well, not so fast. I just thought of something. This bus line doesn't really need to exist. You could just modify the 46 from what I talked about earlier to where instead of it going into PCC Rock Creek, it would just come down 185th from Evergreen into Willow Creek Transit Center so that it could connect with the MAX that way. So either option I think would work.
Line 48. This route wouldn't change at all, but I definitely approve of the frequency upgrade. That is definitely a welcome addition. Line 49, Cornelius Pass. Now this is more or less exactly the same route that I've already come up with. It just travels up Cornelius Pass, and really the only change here is that Trimet wants it to serve the Katama Park and Ride, which is a really smart move, and I wish I had thought of that myself. So this route is perfect. I like this one a lot. Line 60, Brookwood. Now, I'm actually very surprised that Hillsboro's largest neighborhood, I think, doesn't get a bus on its main road on Brookwood. Now, my idea also has it going quite far north on Brookwood and heading down West Union Road toward the PCC area. It wouldn't really need to go into PCC Rock Creek, but maybe to at least 185th and West Union. I don't know if that would be necessary because of how rural it is, but at least having service closer to TV Highway, going all the way up Brookwood to at least the Brookwood Library up by Brookwood and Evergreen, I think at least that much would be very useful. Something I thought about literally earlier today is that you probably don't need to have this bus starting in South Hillsboro and cutting straight through Alexander Street and then going up Brookwood that way. You could actually, between South Hillsboro, where Cornelius Pass is, and Brookwood, have a second bus line on TV Highway. That would be this 60. So, Brookwood Avenue's bus would begin in South Hillsboro off of Cornelius Pass. It would head onto TV Highway and straight down to Brookwood Avenue, and then it would go up Brookwood Avenue. So between Cornelius Pass and Brookwood, there would be lines 57 and 60. I think that would get really, really heavily used. Oh look, there's another elephant in the room. It's time to talk about Intel campuses. Hillsboro is one city with 108,000 people, and we have 3 Intel campuses. Intel, you know, those chips that are probably in your computer? Yeah, it's major employment. 3 campuses just in Hillsboro. Let's talk about those. I'm not going to be talking about the Aloha one right off of TV Highway because that's Aloha, not Hillsboro. Ronler Acres. This campus is huge, and if I'm looking at these maps correctly, it seems like all these new bus lines on Century, Cornelius Pass, and the extension of the 88 up to there, which they called the 111, Seems like it all serves that general area and is fairly well served. So I'm fine with that. Hawthorne Farm. Well, we're already one step ahead because the Max Blue line already serves this campus, so you've got a high capacity transit option to get to Hawthorne Farm already. But I have an idea for something a bit interesting to provide more local trips to here depending on where people live. Cornell Road is really close to here. So if you had the line 48 going on Cornell Road, and you had some weekday rush hour 48s going via Elam Young, or maybe via Hawthorne Farm, however you would want to word that. Elam Young Parkway is a U-shaped route, so you can get back to Cornell. So these weekday rush hour trips would come down Elam Young and serve a couple of neighborhoods through that general area, and then it would swing around, serve the Hawthorne Farm Max station and where the actual Hawthorne Farm campus is, and then go back onto Cornell. And it would only be weekday rush hour trips, and some of them that would do that. I think that would make that Hawthorne Farm campus even better served than it already is. Jones Farm. This is a bit closer to rural Hillsboro. It's very much further north and by the airport, but it is still suburban. I would definitely still consider it suburban. It gets one bus line that runs during weekday rush hour only that Trimet is planning on canceling. You can probably see why I have a problem with this. Please, Trimet, do not cancel this route. Do much the opposite. We need to be increasing frequency. If during the work times the buses ran every 30 minutes and off-peak it ran every hour or even slightly worse, I'd be fine with it as long as it ran all day. Even if it had poor service like that. 30 minutes during the rush, 60 minutes during off-peak, I would be fine with that. And because I'm doing the whole Glencoe and Evergreen and combining that with the 46, like what I talked about in the previous section, you probably don't need to serve the Intel campus on the weekend. So on weekends, line 46 could just travel between Fair Complex Park and Ride and then up over to Evergreen and into the PCC area, because like I said from earlier, the 46 would be called Glencoe Evergreen and would take over today's 47 on Evergreen, which also really needs weekend service. So I hope that makes sense. So on weekdays, the buses would go from downtown Hillsboro to PCC Rock Creek via Intel and via Fair Complex Max Station. But on weekends, the bus would run only between Fair Complex Max Station and PCC. I really hope that made sense. Just don't cancel the 46. Seriously, just try it for, I don't know, a year or 2 or 3 and see if people use it. Give it a try. If the ridership just flat out does not recover and nobody's using it and you're losing a ton of money and whatever, then sure, I guess you could reduce it and cancel it, but I strongly advise against that, because this is the only Intel campus that would no longer be served by transit, which is a big time downside, as again, you want to be taking cars off the street, not onto it. So now we must answer the question of, are the changes too drastic? This is Trimet's biggest ever service change in the history of the company. So we have to ask ourselves, this is going to be quite extreme, quite different from what we see today. Is it a good idea to change it this much? Does it make sense? Is it coherent? I would say, although the changes are really extreme, I do think we need these changes, and I definitely appreciate all the new bus routes for Hillsboro, which has been needing them forever, and any of the other service changes that make sense. I do agree with a lot of things, but I wanted to drive a lot of points home for things I strongly disagree with, and that I have. And remember, these changes are not final. That's why Trimet has this survey to get public input on this. You can bet that I am going to comment on this. Probably by the time you watch this video, I've already commented on it. And I'm not trying to sway your decision of taking the survey or anything. Everybody has their own opinions. You can talk about whatever you want to. But I had a lot to talk about, as you see, and I'm not done yet. So I wanted to get it out in one long video, which this has gone way longer than it was supposed to. I knew it was going to be like a movie, but I didn't know it was going to be like this. Let's talk about the line numbers. I don't really see the extreme need. I know I've mentioned it a couple times, but I don't see the need of having all these crazy high line numbers in the 100s. Some of them make sense because we are going to need to get into that territory at some point, but there's a certain strategy that you could use when using the line numbers. And not only all that, some of these routes are literally just modifications or extensions of existing bus line numbers. Just keep those numbers. There's no need to make a 130 or a 120 or whatever. Just modify the existing route and use the existing route number. So here is my guide to all of the line numbers. And I've also included my 3 on Council Crest so that you can see, because I've talked about it a couple times. Lastly, I have some other thoughts that don't relate to this map, but I really wanted to talk about in this video because forward together, I think there's more than just the bus routes that should be included here. The first thing is overnight max. I uploaded a video literally just last week on night service. So if you want to get an idea for my opinion of overnight max and bus, I would watch that video. But in short, I would have the blue line traveling at least partially from maybe Willow Creek to around Gateway Transit Center, possibly further. And red lines would go between Gateway and the airport only, providing a little bit of service overnight, which is better than nothing, trust me. A new overnight bus or max would circulate the transit mall in downtown Portland and connect to the Rose Quarter Transit Center in some way to provide some overnight service through those areas. Trimet is really lacking when it comes to overnight service, and it is something that would make the system a lot better. I'd also like to see some other FX corridors looked at, and kind of combining this with the last point, FX corridors should probably have overnight bus service, but I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a bit. I would really like to see TV Highway be the next corridor studied for FX. And then after that, get 82nd Avenue in Southeast Portland and Northeast. And then we'll start talking about other ones. That would be a great start though, having FX2, FX57, and FX72. Last thing, tiers. I'm crying. No, not those kind of tiers. I've mentioned them before, but the 3 frequent service tiers. I would introduce a system like that. Here they are on screen and how I would have the frequency run on these. Tier 2 would likely get articulated buses for the routes because they would be the busier routes. And they'd also hopefully get overnight service. And then Tier 3, all the FX lines would definitely get articulated buses and would definitely get overnight bus service. I've said it before, but after all, aren't these supposed to be enhanced bus service? They should be running all night. Alright, movie over. Was the popcorn good? Oh wait, you didn't make any popcorn? Well, you're gonna have to go do that and restart this because you need popcorn. But anyways, this has been a presentation of my bus lines and how my brain works, how my transit brain is always firing. These ideas and recommendations and changes and redesigns have evolved over the course of several years and have led pretty much to this moment, and they're going to continue to evolve, and I will continue to make videos about it. But for now, this has been one long video of Trimet's forward together ideas, what I think of them, whether I agree with them, whether I disagree with them. and just getting my ideas out there too for you to hear. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next episode.